Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Dalton Goolsby. I'm the supervisor of the Urban Horticulture Program here in the Miami-Dade County UF IFAS Extension Office. We're basically here to just help offer you guys solutions to, that cut, mow, and blow form of landscaping that is, so heavily used and employed across Miami-Dade County, by offering alternatives that are, better suited for our environment, assess less stress, and require you to work a lot less as well if done correctly. We're going to look today at a bunch of the water-based issues currently plaguing Miami-Dade County right now, and then also look at a few different solutions we can do to mitigate some of these issues in our own backyards. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, my name is Dalton Goolsby. This presentation was originally developed by my coworker, Barbara McAdam, who could not be here today, but I went ahead and added a couple slides and some new information and stuff like that that is a little more pertinent to right now. So we'll go ahead and, take a look at this and dive into it. So without further ado, the objectives of this talk are hopefully to give you guys an understanding of not only the importance of water in Florida, but the importance of conserving that water, right? Gain a little bit of insight on the different impacts of water-related issues, whether it be economic, social, or a combination of both. And we can also obviously learn how to combat these issues in our own yards to prevent them whenever possible. All right, so let's get started with that first objective, right? Understanding why water is so important and why conserving it is so important. Well, if you look at this little image here, these are usually these little cue cards I give out at all of our tabling events we do around the county. So if you see me at an event before handing out stuff, you've probably received one of these from me. And this just shows our proximity to all of our different water resources here in Miami-Dade County, right? We get about 60 to 80 inches of rain over our heads every single year. We've got the ocean, the bay out to the east of us, right? We've got the Gulf of Mexico, the Everglades, a few miles to the west. Down south, we've got the Keys. And then right here in Miami, we've got, intertidal rookery type areas, right? Those mangrove tidal swamps and things like that, as well as a source of fresh water right beneath our feet called the Biscayne Bay Aquifer. So all of these water resources are extremely important. Water is literally life. Without water, there is no us, right? So that should be one reason why we should want to protect our water resources right there, because without water, there's no us. Another important reason we should protect our water resources is because, first of all, it gives us economy, right? People traveling all over the world to Miami-Dade County to come see our beaches, come see Florida's rivers, our lakes, right? Our springs, and that the economic boost from all those tourists, right? And that really halts if we're not protecting our water resources, right? No one wants to go swimming in a nasty beach where they're going to get sick, or a lake that's infested with E. coli or whatever it may be. And last but not least, it not only to give us recreation, everyone loves going to the beach. So if not for nothing else, if you enjoy going to the beach, you should try and protect it. But also it gives us a food source, right? All the food sourced from the ocean, right? Fishing and things like that also supports a large job. So it even kind of goes back, large job pool. So it even kind of goes back to the economy a little bit on that side. But as you can see, there are many reasons in South Florida, especially why water is so important to us and why we should do everything in our power to protect it. All right, let's look at some big picture issues first of all, and we'll kind of break each of these down and see how it contributes to the overall, issue here in South Florida. And first of all, climate change. Say what you want about climate change, but basically this global shift in temperatures dating back to the Industrial Revolution has slowly but surely been ramping up. We're going to look at a couple figures here to kind of back up, my statements here. But climate change is spearheading sea level rise, right? On the left, we see an image of a glacier. And this is an excerpt from a National Geographic article that came out a couple of years ago in 2019. Glaciers are eroding twice as fast now because they're melting into the water, and then the warming winds and air conditions are also slowly beginning to melt the glaciers as well. So the glaciers are now melting above and below the ice sheet, which is ramping up our sea level rise. And these glaciers in Antarctica, they hold enough water where if they all melted, it could raise global sea levels by nearly 200 feet, which means Florida would be underwater, especially Miami. Another big picture issue, especially here in South Florida, is our low-lying topography, right? We've got so many spots here in Miami that are just at sea level or barely above sea level. So, with these water sea level rise projections out there, the it's starting to seem a little bit grim, right? With our low-lying topography, the damage and impact here will be immeasurable, really. So looking at climate change, obviously we see melting glaciers. You can see here on the image on the right side of my screen here, the basically the regression of this glacier here on this landlocked glacier. And you can see at 1850, the historic level of that glacier, and it's just slowly receded away all the way up until present times, and it's only gotten worse since then. So this article was posted in 2020. So 4 more years of this recession, you can imagine. You can only imagine what it would look like now. Climate change also spearheads our warming oceans. With warming oceans, coupled with a couple of the other issues we're going to look at today, it creates the perfect environment for algal blooms, which cause things like red tide, which spearheads further, bad events like fish kills and things like that, as this harmful algae is blooming and sucking up all that free oxygen in the water, causing the fish to die. And not only that, but sometimes when these algae bloom, they can actually release a toxin into the water that can also kill the fish and things like that as well. So that's why they call them harmful algal blooms. We also see shifts in weather, which for South Florida is kind of concerning because as we merge into this, climate change, I guess, world, right? Weather patterns are going to become more frequent and more intense, right? We're going to have more frequent and more intense storms like hurricanes, tornadoes, things like that. They're not going to be so rare anymore, right? And each time they happen, there's a good chance they'll be more intense with climate change spearheading them. So what's causing climate change? Well, really, it's our energy dependency, right? Um, you know, we depend on gasoline for cars, right? We depend on products to be made for us to go purchase these products. Well, every time we turn a light or every time a product is manufactured or harvested from the earth and transported and refined and then transported to a storefront to be sold, right? All these processes create pollution, and they're all dependent upon our energy dependency, right? And the more people there are, the greater this energy dependency increases. This is just a small little excerpt from an article I was reading. A couple years ago when I initially was adding slides to this PowerPoint, um, electric cars were kind of like the new rage, right? Everyone was kind of swapping over to this electric car craze, which has kind of slowed down a little bit recently. But this was an excerpt from back then. It just showed that even though so many people were buying electric cars, the good that was being done by all these people purchasing electric cars and not emitting the greenhouse gases by burning fuels in their car was actually being undone by so many people buying SUVs, which obviously use a lot more gas and are less conservative than a small compact car would be. So although so many people were buying zero emission electric cars, the uprise in SUV usage in the United States actually was undoing all the good that was being done by people buying electric cars. So kind of interesting there. It also is hard to, stop climate change, especially when we're so concerned as citizens, when our government, isn't really backing us up with all these initiatives we're trying to see out, right? This is an excerpt from while the Trump administration was in office. And this is a study done by the Harvard Law, Columbia Law Schools, where they were just looking at all the environmental rollbacks enacted by our government. And these are still going on, right? People in the government, unfortunately, are incentivized many times to enact some of these environmental rollbacks to, pad their own pockets or whatever reasons it might be, right? It might not be totally linked to corruption, but it's hard to, see it's hard for us, climate freaks to, every time we take a step forward, it seems like our government's making us take a step or two back. So to really, help fight back against climate change, we need to get our government officials on board with us. Like, right now with this golf course drama going on at Florida state parks, like instances like this that will clearly lead to lots of pollution, water quality issues, and things like that. With golf courses being included in our state parks, it's just unnecessary, right? So these are the kinds of things, unfortunately, we'll always be facing, really. All right, so here's some figures for you. If you guys need to see the statistics to back up my claims here. Since 1990, this is measured in up until 2019. The total warming effect of the greenhouse gases in our atmosphere has actually ramped up by about 45%, kind of on an exponential curve. So the more greenhouse gases get into our atmosphere, it kind of reacts exponentially, increasing the amount of warming effect caused by those gases. So it's getting, the more gases that get up there, the hotter and hotter and hotter it's going to get, even faster, exponentially so. So 45%, just the warming effect caused by the gases in our atmosphere since 1990. And then over the last 15 years, we've had a 31% increase in the average snow and ice melt every year. So a 31% increase from 15 years ago, and that was measured in 2019. So very alarming figures there, right? All right. And when you average it out, we can see that since about 1880, which is when these figures were really starting to be measured, we've actually measured a 0.06 tenth of an inch increase in global sea levels. That's, some areas it's more, some areas it's less. But since 1880, we've witnessed a 0.06 inch increase every year, year over year, on average, in global sea level rises. So, sometimes I see pictures on, Facebook where people will post a photo from the 1950s of an island, and they'll say, well, the sea level doesn't seem like it's risen much in, the past 50, 60 years. Well, the effects could be more visible in some areas than they are in others. For instance, I was just in Daytona Beach this past weekend, and the water was almost all the way up to the seawalls there on Daytona Beach, which is way higher than I've ever seen it. And granted, yes, it was a little bit of a high tide, but I've been going to Daytona Beach my entire life, and I've seen many high tides there, and I've never once seen the water that high. So it's a little concerning. All right. And, as it relates to us, issues with sea level rise in Miami-Dade County are many, right? And they're pretty obvious. Flooding, obviously, is a huge one. Flooding causes damage, loss of life, all kinds of issues, right? Especially with water quality, right? That's seawater coming up on land and taking back with it all those oils, chemicals. If people are improperly applying pesticides or herbicides, all those things, even fertilizers, right? Those things can wash off and end up in our ocean and create an unstable environment for the wildlife that live out there. And also create the perfect environment, like I said, with our algal blooms earlier, creates a perfect environment for algae to bloom, which then further exacerbates issues by shading out seagrass, which, kills animals that depend on seagrass to eat. Just a whole host of issues caused by flooding. Saltwater intrusion is another big one. We're going to look at that here in a second. But for those of you who may be on a well system at their house to get water, you may have experienced some issues with saltwater intrusion. This is basically where saltwater invades our freshwater wells, and then all of a sudden you've got saltwater coming out of your household tap, which is never good. Septic failure. If you guys have septic tanks, there's a really good chance in the next 20 to 40 years, your septic tank could be either failing or at risk of failure. We're going to look at some statistics on that here in a bit. And some options that you can do. Unfortunately, it's going to require some money to fix. And then last but not least, a really interesting new issue that's we've been seeing a rise here in South Florida called climate gentrification. So I encourage you all to stick around and listen to how that may be affecting you as well. All right. So issues with flooding, we're going to look at our first little breakdown point here. Obviously, the social impacts, loss of life, damage to property, agricultural destruction, deterioration of health, people getting waterborne diseases, right? So obviously, lots of issues associated with flooding, including water pollution, which is caused by obviously runoff from our own unfortunate mishandling of chemicals, as well as erosion, which is just natural. When the water runs off land, it's going to bring a little bit of that soil with it, which may be contaminated with who knows what, right? Especially here in South Florida. These are looking at Miami-Dade County flood maps. One, first of all, zoomed in on Miami Beach, which you can see is basically one giant flood zone. And then the map on the right is kind of taking a step back and looking at Miami-Dade County as a whole. And as you can see, essentially all of Miami-Dade County is a giant flood zone, right? So there's high potential here for flooding, especially with high rain, in our rainy season where we get so much water. We see a lot of flooding and people ruining cars and their properties getting ruined, their houses getting flooded, right? All these kinds of things. So unfortunately, it's just part of living here in Miami until we can find a way to mitigate it. So all I can really say to do that is try and find some high ground, right? There's new building codes saying how high above sea level things need to be built. But if you do live in one of these areas that is at flood risk, I encourage you to go look up your storm surge planning zones. These can be found on the Miami-Dade County website, or just go on Google and type storm surge planning zones Miami, and just have a plan in the event one of these things does happen near or around your home. All right. Now looking at saltwater intrusion, this is an interesting thing we see here in really all of Florida, having a freshwater aquifer right beneath our feet. Basically, the only thing separating our freshwater our freshwater in the aquifer from the saltwater in the ocean is this really porous oolitic limestone, right? If you guys have ever heard of limestone, you know that there's basically a source of limestone right underneath our feet here in Florida, which helps percolate out all these impurities in the water, rainfall before it gets into our aquifer. So this aquifer is, in theory, a renewable source of water, right? It's going to be recharged by rainfall events and things like that. But as you can see here in the bottom right corner of this slide, with 2.7 million people living in Miami, we can really stress out our water supply. We all get off work at 5 p.m. At least most of us anyway, get off work at 5 p.m. or school or whatever it may be, and we head home. And what's the first thing you want to do? You want to hop in the shower. You want to, wash your hands, brush your teeth. You want to prepare food, right? Boiling water and things like that. You want to have a drink of water. Maybe you want a tea or a coffee, whatever it may be, or maybe you need water for dinner. You're using water somehow in your dinner. So with 3 million people all coming home at one time and putting this huge stress on our water supply, our freshwater aquifer, it can really do a great deal in reducing the pressure in that system, right? I bet you guys have dove to the bottom of a pool before and felt that pressure pushing in on the side of your face. That's water pressure, right? That same force is what's keeping our fresh water in the aquifer, aided by the oolitic limestone, from getting invaded by that salt water in the ocean. There's also a difference in density with that salt water as well, which helps differential in pressures, which keeps them separated. But as we reduce the pressure in our freshwater system, it slowly allows that salt water to invade our freshwater wells, as you can see here in the image up top. And guess what, guys? Once that well gets invaded with salt water, it's next to impossible to ever undo that damage. So, and if it is undoable, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So if we go back and look at Miami Beach, Miami Beach used to be on a well system, and actually there's no freshwater wells left in Miami Beach because they've literally drawn it all out and allowed that salt water to invade in. And like I said, once it gets invaded, it's really hard to ever undo that change. So actually, Miami Beach, since they don't have any fresh water underneath their landmass, they have to literally buy water from Miami-Dade County to supply the beach with. Isn't that crazy? So unless we want to end up like them, we need to really start conserving our water today. Okay, septic failure. This is a little concerning. For any of you guys who know the dangers of E. coli. It's basically a gut bacteria that lives inside of each and every one of our stomachs. And it's we can all each have a slightly differing E. coli in our gut. And if you ingest a different E. coli to the one that's in your own gut, you can get really, really, really sick and potentially even die. So obviously septic tanks, well, if you don't know what a septic tank is, it's basically a concrete box that goes underneath the ground that helps filter out, I guess what is called impurities from your wastewater, right? And the way it does this is there are some filters inside of the septic tank, but really what it's going to do is it's going to filter it out the best it can, and then push that water down into the soil beneath the septic tank. And actually that soil is going to act as a natural filter, filtering out any of the remaining impurities before it gets down into our groundwater. And then by that time, it's fresh, water that's been, completely percolated out, all the impurities, and then that water joins in with our groundwater system. Now, um, here in Florida, I forget the exact distance. I want to say it's 2 to 5 feet, but don't quote me on that. Uh, there's basically a recommended amount of distance beneath a septic tank where they recommend you should have this much unsaturated soil, meaning the groundwater has not come into contact or will not come into contact with this soil. Because, like I said, all that wastewater needs to filter out through that soil, the unsaturated soil, before it gets down into our groundwater. So if the water level, as from the image you can see on the right, if the water level is up too high, or even the septic tank is partially sitting in the groundwater level, you could have a failing septic tank where it's going to be pumping unpurified water full of E. coli, full of human feces into our groundwater system, right? Which is there, first of all, extremely dangerous, and second of all, it's unacceptable, really. Um, Now, unfortunately, if you guys have been reading while I've been talking, these statistics here on the left side of my screen, by reports estimate that by 2040, about 64%, over half of the septic properties in Miami-Dade County, the properties still on septic tanks, will be at risk of failure if they're not already failing, meaning that the tank will either be sitting in groundwater, or there won't be enough groundwater, unsaturated soil beneath the septic tank to filter out those impurities before it gets into our groundwater. Um, if it's sitting in the water, it's a failed system. If there's not enough soil beneath the septic tank, it's called a compromised system. As you can see from the image on the right, you can kind of picture that visually. So there are about 108,000 properties in the county that still use septic, and about almost 67,000 of those are at risk of septic failure by the year 2040. So extremely alarming numbers. But what can we do about it, you ask? Well, the county is trying to hook up all these septic systems to the county sewer line, but unfortunately, Miami was built so long ago and the sewer line never existed. So having to put in a sewer line, especially now with post-COVID, construction costs and things like that, it would cost an estimated, and this is probably conservative, $3.3 billion for the entire county to link up to the septic, to our sewer system, which is a huge number. And as it goes right now, actually, a lot of homeowners are expected to fork up the cost to link up their own home to the sewer system when it finally gets installed in their area, which conservative estimates are putting it at about $15,000 per home to link up to the sewer system, which is a lot, right? But in areas like Pinecrest, where it's completely septic dependent because there's no pre-existing sewer infrastructure, it could cost up to $50,000 per household. So extremely large undertaking there to get Miami-Dade County on the sewer system. But in my opinion, it's something that needs to be done sooner rather than later, before our Biscayne Bay is just full of E. coli, which I mean, I don't even want to think about what would happen then. All right, looking at more potential for water pollution comes in the form of landfills, right? All trash goes to landfills, whatever you throw out. It's a place to dispose of material by burying it over. And what they're going to do is they're going to put more trash on top of more trash on top of more trash, and then, bury it all in dirt and compact it all down with heavy machinery all down on top of each other. And basically, they're going to force out all the air out of that system. So when all this stuff is decomposing without air, the number one byproduct of that chemical reaction is methane gas, which is our most harmful greenhouse gas. So for that reason, we should try to avoid throwing stuff away whenever possible. You should recycle or compost if necessary. And actually, about 90% of the things we've thrown away could have been composted or recycled instead of being thrown away. So just go, next time you're out in the Biscayne Bay, there's a giant landfill right there near the bay, and you can see it from the water. And just think about, next time you're out there smelling and looking at that giant trash pile, just think, wow, if that was 90% smaller than it is right now, because that's really the size it should be if people were disposing of their waste properly. Let's just do a little math. I know everyone loves math so much, right? With about 2.7 million people living in Miami-Dade County as of 2019, the global average is humans use about 2 kilograms of trash per person per day. So, you multiply 2 kilograms times the number of people in Miami-Dade County, and that gives us about 5.5 million kilograms of trash every day produced in Miami-Dade County. Multiply that by 365 days in a year, and that gives us about 2 million grams of trash produced every year in Miami-Dade County, which is about 5 million pounds of trash every year in Miami-Dade County. So if 90% of that trash could be, prevented from going into the landfill, it would go a huge way from preventing leachate from getting into our water system. Leachate is basically just imagine taking your household trash can, filling it up with a jug of water, and then shaking it, and then filling up a cup and drinking that. That water you'd be drinking would essentially be leachate. And every time our landfills are exposed to the elements, so every time it rains, that rainwater is going to percolate down through all that nasty trash, and it's going to sometimes end up out in our oceans, running off and things like that into our environment. So I know I sure wouldn't want to be drinking trash water. So you can prevent that nasty, harmful leachate by being mindful about what you're throwing away. If it should be recycled and can be recycled, then you should recycle it. Miami-Dade County has a great recycling program, which is really unparalleled throughout the rest of the state. You guys can go online and look up Miami-Dade County recycling to learn what you should and should not recycle. And if you want to learn about composting, we do composting classes here, actually virtually, but my office offers them once every other month, and it's a free class, and all attendees basically get the opportunity to get a free composter through the Miami-Dade Solid Waste Department. So if you would like information on our free composting program and get your own free composter, go ahead and shoot me an email, and you'll see my email at the end of this presentation. Mosquitoes are obviously another huge issue with water level rising, flooding, things like that. Mosquito-borne viruses, guys, are already being found in South Florida, including West Nile, Eastern equine encephalitis, St. Louis encephalitis, and many other mosquito-borne diseases are found in different parts of the world. It could very, very easily, kind of concerningly so, be transported here in really a heartbeat. All it's got to do is take one person bringing the disease over here and getting bit by a mosquito, and that mosquito going and biting someone else. So that's all it would take. And actually, mosquitoes, guys, are the most deadliest animal in the entire world. Isn't that crazy to think about? Even more so than sharks or crocodiles or all those, big scary things with teeth. It's actually the mosquito that kills more humans than any other animal in the world. And it's because of these diseases, right? These blood diseases are nothing to mess with. So the way we can obviously ensure that no mosquitoes are in our environment is to ensure there's no standing water. Well, go around and empty, water buckets that have been pooling with water a couple times a week, scrub them out if need be, tightly cover any storage containers, things like that. If you have a rain barrel, you can actually get these mosquito dunks you see on the screen here. This is actually a naturally occurring soil bacteria that is used to make these dunks. So it's all natural, and this bacteria actually interrupts the life cycle of the mosquito. Those little larvae you see aren't able to develop fully when you use these mosquito dunks. All you gotta do is put a couple of niblets of the dunk into some standing water, and it will make it inhospitable for mosquito larvae. All right. And then this is a new issue. I really encourage you guys to all go look this issue up when you have some free time. This is an article from PBS, and this is something called climate gentrification, which is a new phenomenon being observed right now here in Miami-Dade County. And basically, this is how it goes. So historically, when Miami was being founded, obviously there's all different kinds of ethnic groups that make up Miami, right? We've got Haitians and we've got Cubans, right? All making up their own little pockets of Miami, right? Like little Haiti, little Cuba, areas like this. Well, historically, these areas are the highest elevation because historically the areas with the highest elevation sold for the least amount of money. So they were the only places these communities, unfortunately these poorer communities could afford to live. Whereas all the people that had the money, they were buying up areas like Miami Beach and Star Island, areas like this out by the water, right? Because that water was what people wanted. They wanted that beachfront property, right? Well, now with these sea level projections, sea level rise projections coming in, saying that much of Miami-Dade County is going to be underwater in 20 to 40 years. Now, for the first time ever, we're seeing these high elevation properties, these communities that were built by Black and brown skinned people like Little Haiti and Little Havana. The people that have built these communities should have first right in, living in and maintaining these communities. But unfortunately, now because of these sea level rise projections, the property values in these areas is skyrocketing, and the people who built these communities can no longer afford to live in them. So it's something that's becoming known as climate gentrification. These people that built these communities are now being unfortunately forced out of them because they can't afford to live there, because these people are wanting to come in and buy this property that they know one day will be a highly valuable property because it's safe from the sea level, right? This is our impact. It's something called non-point source pollution. Um, and it's funny enough, there's two kinds of pollution, really, of source pollution. There's the point source pollution. I could look at the South Dade landfill, right? Or I could look at the smokestacks rising from the Turkey Creek power plant. I can look at those and I can point at those and say, wow, that's a lot of pollution coming from those two areas, right? But non-point source pollution is a little more diffuse, right? Non-point source pollution will be like the entire village of Palmetto Bay improperly applying say fertilizers or something like that. It's not just one house, right? It's the culmination of all of those houses improperly applying that fertilizer that makes up for this type of pollution. So this is our impact as homeowners, right? Because obviously we're not doing as much damage as a power plant dumping chemicals into a water. Obviously not, but our impact with 3 million residents in Miami-Dade County, the impact of 3 million people can really add up quickly. And that's our impact as non-point source pollution. That's how it can be measured. And this is what it looks like. This is what non-point source pollution looks like. It's trash, debris, chemicals washing off our landscapes, off of those non-porous surfaces like our streets and our driveways and our roads, and going down into those storm drains, which drain out to the oceans many times. So these kind of things, spawn algal blooms. Actually, we have in Miami-Dade County, we have a fertilizer blackout period in our rainy season from May until October, I want to say. I'll put the exact dates in the description here. But the reason we have these fertilizer blackout dates is because when you got these warming oceans and and it's raining a lot, washing all this fertilizer you'd be applying out into our ocean. Well, algae, right, is a plant. It's a plant that lives in the water. So if you've got a warm ocean full of plant food, it just creates the perfect environment for algae to bloom. And that's exactly what we start to see happening. And that algae sucks up all that, and that fertilizer suck up all that free oxygen in the water, which causes fish kills and the toxic blooms and things like that, which kill fish. So unfortunately, it's just an issue that keeps compounding on itself, right? Like, for instance, a couple of years ago, we experienced a record number of manatee deaths associated with starvation. I love manatees, so this especially hit home for me. Manatees are called sea cows. They're called this because they eat so much seagrass, as you can see in the photo on the top right, all that seagrass around those manatees. Well, the algae that blooms on the top of the water surface is going to take up all that sunlight that the seagrass on the bottom of the water needs to grow, right? It needs that sunlight to photosynthesize, just like a normal plant. And if the algae is taking up all that sun, the seagrass can't grow, and the manatees and other fish that rely on that seagrass then die out. All right. So if you live in a neighborhood here in Florida, I used to live right next to one actually my whole life, my whole childhood growing up. Florida's full of these stormwater retention ponds, right? And the idea is that it's supposed to retain the stormwater to prevent it from running off all at once and help percolate out a lot of those impurities. But unfortunately, a lot of these, they did a study, UF did a study, and they actually found that these stormwater retention ponds were actually releasing more carbon into the atmosphere than they were restoring. The older storm ponds that actually show that they were working as intended, the older storm ponds that, had, basically had microclimates existing in them now, because it's basically like a lake, because they've been around for so long, right? They've got a small ecosystem now supporting them. They can handle the carbon dump, but these newer ponds where it's literally just a field of grass dug down into a ditch, they actually are emitting more carbon than they're storing. So actually exacerbating the issue more than, undoing the damage that we're causing. So um, unfortunately, it's going to be up to us, right, to, try to mitigate these issues in our own yards, right? Because these carbon storage ponds that they're intended to prevent this release of carbon into the atmosphere are actually um, working against us. So hopefully we can pick up some of the slack in our own landscapes, and I'll show you guys how. And it's through Florida friendly landscaping. This is my contractually obligated statement, I like to say. Florida friendly landscaping is the state of Florida's premier extension program promoting sustainable alternatives to conventional landscaping. It provides guidance on low impact, environmentally friendly, science-based landscape practices that use less water and reduce pollutant loading to our Florida bodies of water. So they basically help you reduce your impact through education. That's what Florida friendly landscaping is all about. And if you take in these principles to heart and do a little research, you can actually save yourself time, money, and effort, right? Getting out there and constantly replanting things that are always dying, stuff like that. So let's take a quick look at Florida friendly landscaping. It's founded on 9 principles that we use to basically back up all of our research and things like that. And the cornerstone and most important principle is our number 1 principle, which is right plant, right place. If you're putting plants in spots in your landscape where they're best suited to grow, according to their climatic requirements, their water requirements, things like that, you're going to be setting the plants up for success long term. The examples I always like to give are, first of all, an oak tree, right? If you plant an oak trees are beautiful. I love oak trees. They're literally trees of life. So many things depend on oak trees, right? Um, but you're not going to plant an oak tree 5 feet from the foundation of your home. It's going to be always growing branches over your roof. You're going to have to always be cutting those branches back, which opens up a wound on the plant. And just like humans, right, when we get a wound, we need to do neosporin and a bandage to prevent infection. Well, if you're always cutting open wounds on the tree doesn't heal as fast. You could be, inviting in disease and pests and things like that could further compromise the health of that tree, which would then compromise your home, right, if the tree fell on it. So mature size is one of the things you should always be considering when you're planting things in the right place. Another thing is another example I like to give is grass, right? Homeowners are always sending me samples of their grass, and they're like, I've replanted this spot in my yard 6 times, and the grass never grows. What's the matter? Do I need a soil test? What's going on? And the answer is usually, well, your grass needs a lot of sun and a lot of water to grow. And if it's getting a lot of water without a lot of sun, it could really cause those roots to rot and die, get fungal issues, all kinds of things, right? So, instead of constantly replanting that grass in the same spot, which has failed time and time again, why don't you look up a plant that's better suited to grow in those conditions? And then you can save yourself all the money constantly resodding, and then all the time it takes getting out there and replanting. And, it just compounds on itself. And if you guys need things like plant suggestions, or if you have questions about your landscape, you can send us questions for free, and we'd be more than happy to answer them and point you in the right direction. All right. Our other principles, not as well, they are all equally important, but I'm just going to quickly touch on them unless they apply more closely to this talk. Watering efficiently, especially during our rainy season. Many of the issues you see in your landscape are because a lot of your plants don't need that excess water. They don't need excess irrigation when it's already raining so much, right? Sometimes we can actually be doing more damage to your plants than good by overwatering or underwatering, right? Underwatering is an issue as well, but the conditions for overwatering and underwatering that show up on your plant are actually very similar. So oftentimes, especially in Miami where we get so much rain, people think they're underwatering their plant and they're actually grossly overwatering it, which is causing the issues they're seeing. Fertilizing appropriately. You can reach out to us and we'll offer you recommendations on fertilizer, time of year, things like that. Mulching is very important. Mulch helps retain moisture. You won't need to be watering as often if you're mulching. And also mulch is going to decompose and be supplementing your soil as that mulch decomposes as well. So it's basically like almost like a not free because you're still paying for the mulch, but a cheaper version of that fertilizer you'd be buying. Attracting wildlife. I'm a huge butterfly guy, butterfly nerd. I'm getting into birds and bees as well. If you want to learn more about attracting wildlife, I recommend you go to our channel, and we have pages on bees, moths, and butterflies, and I believe one on birds as well, that you can learn how to attract each one to your landscape. Managing yard pests responsibly. Send us photos, guys. It's a free service. You can send us photos and ask, hey, what is this pest, or what is this in my yard? Is it helpful? Is it harmful? And we'll tell you what it is and how to act in the least toxic method, so you can ensure you're doing the least amount of damage possible to your environment while still fixing the issue. Recycling yard waste, well, you can do this through composting. And I've already told you about our composting program. If you want to learn more about it, feel free to send me an email, and you'll see my email at the end of the presentation. Reducing stormwater runoff and protecting the waterfront. We're going to learn about those. So we're gonna take a deeper look. And starting with protecting the waterfront, one great way we can do that is by maintaining what's called a buffer zone. Basically, this actually it says 10-foot wide minimum, but actually in Miami they're recommending 20-foot wide of no buffer zone. Basically, if you have a lake or something like that on your property, they recommend just leaving a zone of 20 feet wide. I know it's a large area of a non-maintenance zone. That means you're not mowing, you're not cutting, you're not applying any chemical or fertilizer in this area whatsoever to prevent it from running off and ending up in that body of water. And you might think, well, how can I do that and still keep it attractive, right? If I own the land, you probably want it to look, attractive, right? And there's a misconception about wild things not being attractive. I think especially with an aquatic edge, like a riparian zone of aquatic edge plants, can be extremely attractive on the edge of a pond, more so than just having mowed grass going all the way into that pond, in my opinion. And actually, research done in UF has shown that this to be true. About 70 to 80% of people prefer a naturally landscaped yard over a completely mowed yard. So when you're planting sometimes people call this rain garden or bioswale or something like that. Really, it's an emergent aquatic zone, right? That you're going to plant with plants. And the roots of these plants are going to like getting wet. So you're not going to have to worry about those root rot issues that you would with things like grass and stuff like that. But the roots of these plants go deep, right? And they actually act as almost natural filters, filtering out any impurities. Roots, guys, roots are nature's best filter, right? So these riparian edge plants help filter out any impurities on the water's edge before they make it into the water body. So, and also they do a great job at soaking up any excess water as well. So if you've got a spot in your landscape where your grass is always getting flooded and dying and looking muddy, well, why don't you try planting a beautiful native, aquatic garden, and actually that would, first of all, not die off every time it rained, and it would actually attract wildlife to your landscape, like hummingbirds and bees and butterflies and moths and things like that, to entice you and reward you for all your hard work. All right, these are things you can do to take up the fight at your own home. Of course, building a rain garden. We actually have a video on that. I'm going to show you the link to the video here in a second, so you guys don't have to go guessing about it. My coworker Barbara, who originally made this presentation, she has a video on the Florida Native Plant Society YouTube page about creating your own rain garden that includes plant selection and things like that. Great resource. Rain barrels. We have a rain barrel program in addition to our composting program, where you can watch a video online or attend a class in person and receive a $50 rebate for any qualifying rain barrel you purchase through Water and Sewer Department. So if you want to learn more about that program, please email me and I'd be more than happy to send you a link to get that low-cost rain barrel. You can also get free plant and insect identification. So that way, like I said earlier, you can know how to act and what you're acting against before you just randomly go pick up an insecticide or randomly go pick up an herbicide. It might be a beneficial native insect or plant that you don't want to kill, right? It could actually be doing good work for you. We have beneficial insects that actually eat pests. So I see it so many times, people will be killing beneficial insects, and then they start seeing the pests increase in their landscape, and they wonder why. Well, it's because you killed all the ladybugs, you killed all the assassin bugs, right? All right. And then one last thing you can do is you can update your fixtures. Another program, we promote it, but WASD is the one who enacts it. They have a high efficiency fixture rebate program where shower heads, faucets, toilets, you can actually get WaterSense certified fixtures and get rebates for installing them in your home through the Water and Sewer Department. So not only will these things, save you money over the course of their lifetime, like for instance, the tub will pay, a high efficiency toilet will pay itself off 10 to 20 times over the course of its lifespan. So you'll be saving more money than you spent on the toilet over the course of its lifespan. And on top of that, water and sewer will give you money back when you buy it. Here's the rain garden presentation on YouTube. Just look up Creating Rain Gardens, Florida Native Plant Society on YouTube, and it'll pop up. And that's the image for it. Barbara's got her mask on from COVID time still. It was a couple years ago now, but the information is more pertinent now than it ever has been. And you can see these aren't projects we've done. Unfortunately, we have done some rain garden projects in the county, but this is just to show you how attractive a rain garden can be if done correctly. You can see here, just the amazing native wildflower garden they made out of their bioswale there. If you guys need to learn about plants and you're too nervous to reach out to little old me and ask, this is an awesome resource. This is an awesome resource that you can use. Go on Google and look up natives for your neighborhood. And this should be one of the first links that pops up, the Institute for Regional Conservation Natives for Your Neighborhood page. You can click on this website and you can type in your zip code and it'll kick you back a list of all the habitats that have existed historically in the zip code, as well as a list of plants and animals that you can expect to see in your zip code, and things that'll grow easily without irrigation, right? You don't need to water it in with a sprinkler system. And you can also, here I went in and typed in the zip code 33126, which is the zip code at my house, and you can search, you can learn all the plants that would be best suited to growing in your area. Then you don't have to use as much water, as much chemical like that, things like that to, keep your landscape flourishing and beautiful. It's going to be a native garden, right? Our native plants have grown in Florida for thousands of years without irrigation. So why would they need irrigation now? That's the idea behind planting native. It requires a lot less maintenance, a lot less input of resources to thrive and be beautiful. And studies show that 70 to 80% of people prefer the native landscape over the grass landscape. Why more people don't do do native landscapes, I don't know. It might have something to do with HOAs, but that's another talk for another day. Here's some information about our rain barrel workshops. Obviously, this one was from a couple of years ago when I was adding slides to this presentation, but we still do them usually about once a month, every other month at least. So if you want to get information on our next upcoming presentation or just about the program in general, you can look it up on Google or shoot me an email. And it's just a little joke in here that Barbara threw in that I thought was funny enough. If nothing else, right, if that rain barrel ends up, Miami gets flooded and the rain barrel kind of becomes a moot point. Well, at least you'll have the rain barrel to maybe make some kind of raft device if, Miami goes underwater. It'll be a little bit like that movie Waterworld, if any of you have ever seen that, where it's basically like the entire earth is flooded and people are living on rafts floating to and from to try and survive. So that could be the dystopian future we're headed towards, if things don't change, right? But at least with our rain barrel, from our programs, you can be prepared even for the apocalypse. Just kidding, but it's a fun little joke in there. We have an awesome landscape irrigation rebate program. If you have pre-existing in-ground sprinklers for your landscape, you can actually get money back for making water-saving changes to your landscape. And actually, just last year, this program saves over 100 million gallons of water per year. So, and that number only increases every year as more and more people convert their system. So, if a team of 5 or 6 people here at our office can save the county a couple 100 million gallons of water every year, then just think about if 3 million people in Miami all took up this initiative, right? We'd save a lot of water. All this, including this talk, all these programs and resources, all of it's part of the water use efficiency program enacted through Miami-Dade County to try and reduce our urban water usage, right? So if you guys want to learn more about that, go look up the water use efficiency program on Google, and you can read all about that, as well as our programs. You can look up that terminology and find information and links to all of our programs. The landscape irrigation program, Florida Friendly Landscaping, rain barrels, all what have you, right? And if you don't find it, like I said, shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to help. This is the logo for the WaterSense certification. If you are interested in doing these fixture rebates, the toilets, the shower heads, and the faucets. First of all, make sure that your home fits in the criteria. The home has to be built before 96. And the toilets and shower, any fixture you buy has to have that logo on it, or else you won't get the rebate. You can see the rebate amounts on the right side. They don't seem like much, but like I said, all these fixtures will pay themselves off tenfold over the course of their lifetime. And if you're a senior, they actually have a senior toilet rebate program where they'll actually give back $200 for a senior toilet installation. So if you're a Miami-Dade County senior, you have to be a resident as well. You can actually get more money for that toilet. And actually, some of those senior toilets will actually raise or lower with hydraulic pressure to actually, make it easier to stand and sit down on the toilet for those seniors with bad knees. So it's a great, great program for them. All this has been made possible by the Resilient Cities Network, which was created by the Rockefeller Foundation, which recognized Miami and the beaches as a resilient city, which led to the establishment of our Chief Resiliency Officer, as well as the Office of Resiliency. So you may have heard of this office. This is a literal governmental office now, which I think is so awesome that we have one here in Miami-Dade County. And I just met our Chief Resiliency Officer a couple months ago at an award ceremony for our landscape irrigation rebate program. So it's an award-winning program if you guys are interested. And this is just some examples of change in our own backyards, right? Change that we've already done. This is a project led by Barbara to install a rain garden and bioswale, as well as a pollinator garden at our Cola Lakes Park. You can see her plans here. And you can see in the top right corner that this is a deep in the middle of a flood zone, this Arcola Lakes Park area. So this was a critical area to help mitigate some of these issues associated with sea level rise. And here's just some pictures of the installation as we're doing it and after it was finished. You can see it's a cute little garden when it was done. All right. These are just some examples of low impact development, and you can go on Google and look up a conservation subdivision by UF, and this is a research article done by UF. It's available online for free. And these are just some of the things that in the future we should hopefully begin seeing implemented in new development around Florida. Unfortunately, I dislike development as much as the rest of us Floridians, but building houses is necessary, right? People need to find a place to live. So hopefully in the future, as more development moves into Florida, hopefully they start picking up some of these sustainable practices, right? Like permeable surfaces, allowing that water to percolate through this concrete instead of run off and go down a storm drain. Bioretention, like rain gardens, right? To help filter out any impurities that may slip through the cracks. Even green roofs, planting. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Disney. I've been around Epcot, and you go in. I think it's Norway, by the Frozen Castle, and they have those roofs with green plants on them, like they're literally growing flowers and grass on the roof. Well, those roofs, normal roofs get extremely hot, right, and actually emit heat, which causes things like climate change to ramp up by increasing what's called the island effect. Basically, it makes it more hotter than it needs to be. So green roofs help eliminate that radiation of heat off of our roofs. And of course, rain barrels as well helps retain water. And you can see this is an image of a futuristic plan for a low impact development community. Shared driveways, right? Reducing the amount of hardscape in our landscapes will reduce the island effect, also reduce the amount of runoff. So, I mean, there's no need for you and your neighbor who live right next door to each other to each have your own driveway, right? If you just make it a little bit wider, thinner than two individual driveways would be by themselves, and you can save yourselves a lot of, first of all, money, not having to lay out a whole nother driveway, but also it's going to make your neighborhood cooler as well. You can also see in the middle of that image, in the middle of that little cul-de-sac there, you can see shared parking spaces for guests, right? You don't need to have a huge long driveway for all your guests to park in. You could have a small concentrated parking area maybe in the middle of these communities, right, for all guests to share equally. So just some ideas, right? And I encourage you guys to look into this, maybe implement one or two of these in your own home if you have the know-how. And I encourage you guys to stay connected if you enjoyed the talk today. Follow us on our socials. Our YouTube page has all kinds of videos. Actually, this presentation today will be uploaded to our YouTube. And as well as I encourage you to check out the rest of our In Your Backyard series presentations. They're extremely informative and geared towards homeowners like yourselves who live in South Florida. So thank you guys so much for coming. And I hope you guys all enjoyed and learned something today, took something away from our presentation. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.